I've got 5 terrifying Dogman encounters for you tonight that will absolutely send chills down your spine. Everything from a Dogman creature following a guy home after he spotted this thing and standing outside of his window, actually heard this thing breathing outside of his window, to a Dogman creature trying to break in this guy's house. These stories are crazy. I've got some good ones for you that will just absolutely keep you up at night. Before we jump into any of that, I just want to say thanks for being here. If you've got an encounter you would like to send me, you can send it to me by email at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. But let's jump right into these stories.
I was on my way to drill, so I had to work late because I work at a college in Mississippi. It was already getting dark by the time I was leaving my house, and I drive like 2.5, 3 hours down to my drill hall and stay there. But I go down a highway called the Natchez Trace, which is a lot more secluded. Like from my house to the drill hall, it's like a 1 mile enter and exit. So it's a straight shot pretty much. I don't have to deal with interstate traffic or something. And it's maybe a little slower because it's like a kind of a back roads highway, but straight shot. There were deer out. I kept seeing them in my headlights. I didn't have the best headlights, but I saw their eyes first, and then as I got closer, you could see the deer, and they kind of scampered off once you got too close. But I was about 10 miles out of my house. It was already dark, and I wouldn't say I was scared, but you know how there's just certain moments that you kind of get that feeling of dread. I wasn't fearful of anything, or at least I didn't feel like I was, but I was like, you just get like sixth sense ominous feeling every now and again. I don't know if this had anything to do with it, but it was kind of mixed with the just this weird bad smell. Like every now and again, like mud down here, just some rank mud that sits and gets stale, starts to smell bad. And I was like, it's nothing of it. It's Mississippi. There's mud everywhere. It's like, it's probably just nastiness. But I was coming up on a set of eyes on the right, and it was like maybe 4 or 5 different eyes. I was like, okay, there's some more deer coming up, and sure enough, they were kind of like looking up at me, just deer in headlights, just not moving. And then I saw a set of eyes on the left side of the road, and this pair of eyes on the left would not break eye contact with me. They would go from the road to like up the bank, probably to the tree line, and back down to the road, like it was just pacing back and forth. And it's weird because both eyes never broke contact with me, and that was what made it so weird to me at first. And I eventually got up to it. I was still watching the deer on the right because I knew what they were, and I didn't want them to run out in front of me. But I finally got up to it, and my headlights actually hit this creature, whatever it was. And I hit it on its like pace back from the road to the tree line. So it was heading toward the tree line, and my headlights finally hit it, and it was like, I don't know, I'm still dumbstruck. It was a dog on all fours. It was on all fours, but it was a dog, but it was like the size of a cow. Like it wasn't fat like a cow, but it was the height and like the width, and not the size a dog should be. And it was very toned, which was weird. Like it wasn't like a bodybuilder. It wasn't just bulked with muscle, but its muscular structure, I guess, was so defined that I wouldn't call it lanky. It had, like some build to them, but it was, I don't know, unless it's like a roided out pit bull, you usually don't see muscles on dog a whole lot. They're kind of just, stringy, lanky creatures. But this one, It was like pure white, or maybe it was like a light gray or something. Again, it has some bad headlights. But when it started walking to the tree line, this was its final pace. It was going into the trees at this point. I looked at its like midsection, its torso, I guess, and it's because at this point I was like from the road, and then just kind of piecing it, like bisecting it all the way up to its head, and like its torso. You know how a normal dog's torso, or at least a skinnier dog's, it's got like that big round rib cage, and then just a super slope for its stomach. I don't know. It's kind of a weird slope, but it's the bottom of the rib cage, and then goes into its stomach area. This one was a thick old rib cage, but then was straight, like a man's torso would be. And again, it was very well defined. You could see like a toned male's rib muscles, or the muscles that would surround his ribs. You could see that over his ribs, and then like down into an ab structure of some sort. It was he was showing me his profile, so I didn't get to see like the front stomach. So I don't know if it was abs, but and then like keep going up, its front legs were, or arms, or whatever they might have been, were on the ground. Like, the way he was walking, he had his hands on the ground, but it looked like some lanky, toned arms of a person. The grass was high, so I don't exactly know what fingers looked like at this point, or digits, or whatever he had. But see, I'm still trying to picture everything in my mind. Its hind legs were that of a dog's. It was like that. I don't know proper anatomy of a dog, but you know the dog's hind legs kind of has that backwards knee and just kind of goes into a foot. I don't know. And the big hip bone, that looked normal. I didn't question that. I was like, oh, dog. Oh, not dog. And kept going up. It went off into, at least from profile view, kept a dog's neck, and then a dog's head for the most part, with like pointy ears, still white or light gray. And I was, again, dumbstruck. I didn't think to slow down anymore. I didn't think to speed up. I didn't think to pull out a phone. I was just kind of looking at it as going by. I was like, that's a weird cow. Wait a second. And then it got to the tree line, and as I was about to pass it, and there was still more I needed to pay attention to. I was looking at this creature, but again, there was road. There could be oncoming traffic. There was those deer on the right that were still there for some reason. So I started to unfocus, but like before I passed it and it got to the tree line, it raised up like it put a hand on a tree, like one of the front two appendages on a tree, and then started to proceed to like walk into the tree line bipedally. I didn't see a tail or anything, and it didn't look back after, pretty much like after my headlights actually hit it. It was no longer focused on staring at me. It was just like, all right, he's too close. I'm going to leave and not even look back anymore. So he started to pay me no attention and then go into the woods. But it looked like it stood up, grabbed a tree limb to like help him through that initial thicket, and then he disappeared into the woods. I didn't feel like I was in danger. I didn't get scared after that, really. And I had that feeling of dread, but not particularly fear before I saw it. And that might have just been that sixth sense, God telling me like, hey, there's something ahead. It's like, and then I pass it, and I don't know, I was awestruck. I don't know, but my initial reaction was, I was just kind of looking at it. I was like thinking about it in my head. It's like that wasn't that wasn't normal. And against better judgment, I did start texting while driving, oops. But I started texting my dad. I'm like, hey, Dad, I just saw something weird. He asked me what. I told him to the best of my description without going in too much detail because I was driving. Um, and he actually texted back like almost immediately. He's like, hey, dude, you need to go. Like, don't stay there any longer. I'm like, okay. I mean, yeah, I didn't plan on stopping, but I will take your advice. I'm like, wow, what's up? Is like, well, the way you described it sounded exactly like a Dogman, and I'd heard that name before. I didn't look into it as much. I mean, before then, just because I don't know. I don't know. I didn't look for stuff really. It always interested me, but I wasn't particularly in tune with the Dogman of sorts. But after like he gave no hesitation, he was like, "Hey, you need to get out of there. Don't stop. This might be what it was." I'm like, "Ooh, okay." Now I'm a little frightened because my dad was actually in the military as well, and his dad, or my grandfather. He was a Marine for a little bit, and like to me, I'm like, "Oh, nothing can scare him." But then I just tell him this story, and he's like, "Hey, dude, get out of there." I'm like, "Okay." There's some more stuff to it if you want to talk about it. I don't know how much time you've set aside for it.
Absolutely. Let's talk about it, man. I'm sure our audience would love to hear more, so go right ahead.
Okay. So that was on my way to drill. I continued the rest of the drive, got to where I needed to be, and the rest was, normal after that. I got back home probably a few weeks later. And my grandfather, who lives in the house lives in the other half of the house with us, was very sick at the moment during that time, and it's like some just weird things happening throughout, and I don't know how much you actually want me to go into, but specifically for a Dogman portion, there is a bit. He was sick, so he was off and on weird schedules, but I was going to bed late one night, and I heard out like the back window it was a window that would go into the back of the house, which is like a pretty good sized pasture, and then a tree line maybe about 150 yards out. And it was around 11:30 or 11, and I started hearing, or I got that same feeling of dread first. I didn't smell anything this time, but I got a feeling of dread, and this was a few weeks later after this, with no type of sighting between here and then. But I was laying in bed, got that feeling, and then it felt like I just heard footsteps on like grass, and since it's fall at this point, it was like on leaves, so it was some crunchy footsteps. And maybe like a raspy breath. It was like, I don't know. It was one of those things that I'm trying to like put out of my mind so it doesn't go wild, so I can go to sleep finally. But I couldn't help but hear it, and it lasted for a few minutes, and eventually just stopped. And I went to sleep. Nothing happened. I woke up, and me and my mom go to work. We work at the same college, so and since he was sick, or since Papa was sick, and Nana was also there, we like checked on them in the morning before we left for work. So we went into there, and Papa was just one of those old types. Like, he might just sit there and like stare out a window, just waiting for deer to come out just to look at them. See when a good time was for him to actually get out to start hunting. But so he has like a floor to ceiling window in their living room, and I guess I kind of got that from him while Mama was checking on the folks. Papa was just kind of sitting back, and I was like looking at the window like he would, just looking, see if there was any deer that morning. And he came up behind me and was like, "You see anything?" I'm like, "Nope, not at the moment." He said, "Did you see anything last night?" I'm like, I don't guess I really looked outside last night. Why? Did you see something? He said, yeah, I couldn't go to sleep for the life of me last night, hurting and all. So I just sat up and looked outside for a while. And there was this weird, dark, like black creature that hung low to the ground that came out of the woods and started making its way across the pasture. And I'm like, what? What? Like, I mean, because he has never said anything like this before. I've never mentioned any type of cryptid experience with him before. But it just came out of the blue, and I'm like, well, dang, when'd you see it? He said, it's probably just before midnight. Like, I just couldn't go to sleep. I'm like, I didn't proceed to like talk to him about it or anything because he's a talker, and if we get into a conversation, I'm gonna be late for work. But um, I had that experience with him, and that got me thinking. So I drove to work, and I told my dad again because Dad does think about all these things, believes in this type of stuff. So he's a very good one that I can come talk to about everything. I told him, I was like, Dad, the weirdest thing just happened again. Like, I had that same feeling that I shared with you on my drive, and I couldn't go to sleep, and I heard these weird sounds, and then just like out of random, my papa was, hey, I saw something weird last night that wasn't a deer or a pig, and it came out of the woods. I'm like, that is the weirdest coincidence that I felt bad and he saw something. And my dad proceeded to make it worse by saying, uh, are you saying this was last night? Like, just last night before you came to work today? I'm like, yeah, why? He said, dude, I got woken up at like 11 o'clock with God telling me like I should pray for you. Something's wrong. I'm like, talking about like 11, would you say like 11:30? It was like, yeah, something around that. I just started praying for you and your family's safety over there. And I'm like, well, I mean, it worked because you prayed and whatever it was left my immediate surroundings. So I mean, I guess it's a good thing, but at the same time, that just kind of keeps confirming every little thing. I'm like,
Well, Martin Groves and I have been best friends for almost 44 years. And when I say best friends, I'm talking about somebody you trust 100% and confidence in him and trust him to have your back when you're in certain places we go to. But Martin and I have been to LBL. I don't even know how many times we've been there. So many times. And a lot of times we get out there and stay 2 or 3 days, just he and I. The last 3 or 4 years, it's been mostly he, myself, and Barton Nunley and my other close friend Ron Moorhead. And we get together as often as we can. It's been a while since we've all been together, but it'll be starting up here this next month. We'll be back in full gear again and ready to go. But that particular day when what you're talking about is where we seen the Dogman close to Martin's area where he had his encounter in 1993, were two Dogman type creatures that tried to attack him and kill him. And there were also two Bigfoot in front of the camp too, which we now believe could have possibly been Gugway instead of Bigfoot. But this particular area, as far as I know, since I don't think anybody's ever been to that particular spot where Martin had his encounter in 1993, except me. We were headed that direction. We've been in the LBL for 2 nights and maybe 2 days and 2 nights at that particular day. This was actually the 29th anniversary, not to the date, but as to the year of Martin's encounter. It was in 2020 or 2022. It was October of 2022. And we had been there, like I said, been scouting out an area. Well, actually, 3 different areas. One area that we scouted out real heavy and found lots of tracks, huge Dogman tracks, was on the other side of McCumbers Bay. And this is in the land between the lakes, LBL as we call it. That's part of Tennessee and Kentucky. And we mainly researched the Dogman creature on the northern end. There seems to be more sightings and more action for the Dogman on the north end, and seems to be more encounters and more sightings of Bigfoot on the south end. So that particular day, we had been out there all day. We had rode this particular area and hiked on these trails and through a creek bed, and had quite a bit of Bigfoot action in there. A few whoops, a few little sticks and rocks thrown at us, and certain area that we go into there, and not far from there is a place not too far, which Martin refers to as the Devil's Backbone. Not too far from that area is where we were going that night, and we had just stopped. The Traceway goes all the way through the LBL. If you're not familiar with the LBL, it's 170,000 acres of just rural nothing. There's a few campgrounds scattered out in it. There used to be a lot of campgrounds. A huge number of them have been closed and shut down for what we call a reason we know, but no apparent reason why you shut down an expensive campground that had a store, had a playground in it, a bathhouse, basketball court, and they just shut it down overnight. You know, it makes no sense to us, but we have our own theories on why that's happening. But that particular day, we had been in there all day. We had pulled on a now the LBL on the trace. There's roads that go. The trace is the main road that runs from south to north, runs all the way through the entire park. And there's roads in different areas you turn off of there that are paved, but then they turn into gravel roads and dirt roads, and you can go back in there on some of these areas, and you can get lost back there really easy. They go back there for miles and miles. I mean, the road runs out, and you just keep going, and you're running on to the left on a gravel road, to the right on a dirt road. You just keep going back in there. These are just areas that used to be the National Park Service. Now it's run by the Forestry Service, and these areas are cut out for maintenance and things is what they are, but they're very untravelable. A lot of these roads are. You get stuck back there if you're not careful. And if you don't know where you're at, you will get lost, I can assure you. And Martin knows the park probably better than anybody I've ever known. He knows that area really well. We had gotten back in there. It was late at night. I don't remember what time, but it was after 11 o'clock, and we had just stopped in the middle of nowhere on a gravel road, and we were getting kind of hungry. We got out and put his tailgate down on the back of his truck and stopped and got out and just had a snack. We sat on the back of the truck and talked and had a snack, and sitting there talking, and I heard something over to the left, and you know, we hear everything. There's so many deer and everything there. It could be anything. Just because you hear a sound don't mean it's a Dogman or Bigfoot, because in most of the cases it's not. But anyway, we got back in the truck, and we're very close to the area that we were wanting to go to. We stopped because we didn't want to go back in there and cause any unusual attention of sitting around and making a lot of noise in the truck. So we had just turned on this gravel road, put the tailgate up, got back in the truck, just barely turned on the gravel. Well, it's part gravel, part dirt. And we're going maybe 1 or 2 miles an hour, just enough for the truck to be moving. And we're driving back to the area now that where Martin had his encounter in 93. And you can't drive all the way back. You have to stop and get out and walk. But we're in between the place to walk and the area you can drive back to get out. And I have the window down on my passenger side. Martin's driving, and I look over in the ravine to the right of me. There's a steep ravine right there, and there's a little slope. There's a creek bed there and a culvert, and I see this blue mist. It looked like a mist, some kind of just like smoke almost, a mist coming into there. And I'm thinking, what is that? And I look down, and there's this creature laying down on this kind of a slanted bank there, which was going down to the creek bed, and its legs and feet are down in the grass, but it's looking right at me, and it's in a position like a cat is when it's going to pounce on a mouse or something. It's looking right at me. I'm looking out the window. I'm 5 to 6 foot from this thing. I could reach out and probably touch it if I had to. But I'm looking down and I see this creature and it's looking right at me. It's got a massive head. The blue mist turns into a silver gray color. The whole creature is silver gray in color. The very tips of its hair were lit up. That sounds strange, but it's true. Every little tip of its little hair on its coat was kind of like lit. It's hard to explain, but and it was staring right at me. It had a huge head. It had mane around its head like a line, and it's looking right at me. And it's got these deep eyes. They're real deep. They look like clear flashlights. They're just solid clear, and they're looking right at me. And I'm thinking, what in the world is this? I've never seen anything like this. And about that time, I reach over to Martin, and he'd already seen it. I said, are you seeing that? He goes, yeah, I already see it. About that time, Martin gets zapped, or infrasound, whatever you want to call it. We personally think it's some type of radiation. Joe and Jesse of Hellbent Holler think the same thing. They actually found radiation in a Dogman or a Bigfoot track with a Geiger counter. So anyway, Martin's sick. I look over at him. He's slumped up over the steering wheel. And I said, man, are you okay? And then about that time, I get hit. But I'm not in the shape he's in. I'm more, my upper chest feels like somebody's standing on it. And my right leg is numb. I've got a headache. And I'm trying to look at him because he was telling me, he said, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. My throat's swelling together and my tongue is swelling up. I can't breathe. And I'm nervous thinking he's going to pass out over there. And in the meantime, we got this creature on the right sitting looking in the window right at me. I'm thinking it's going to jump in the window. About that time, it gets up and it walks down the side of the truck. It goes around the back of the truck. Martin's looking in the rearview mirror. He says a few days later, it looked like it just glided across the road. Not run, but glided like. And comes around his side of the truck. There's a big field there. And the field goes a little ways and it goes up a huge hill with nothing but woods for miles. And this creature was walking on that trail, looking back at us in the truck. The inside of the truck had such a terrible smell that you couldn't even breathe hardly. It smelled so bad. Martin kept saying, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I'm worried about him. I said, let me drive. Let me come around the other side. He goes, no, let me get us off this road. And he's still going down the road at a slow pace. This creature's looking back at us. And the weirdest thing about this creature, it was a full creature. You could see it, but you could also see through it. It was transparent. And it was walking and it went up this hillside looking back at us. And you could hear limbs breaking, sticks. Went up into the woods and it's breaking, and we're still coasting down this road at maybe 2 or 3 miles an hour. And I'm trying to worry about Martin passing out, and here we are back in there with this creature. And I don't know if there's another one or just this one, but I keep telling him, let me drive. And I'm feeling a little better. I'm in better shape than he is, and my leg was feeling better, and I could move a little better. And I said, let me drive. He goes, no, let me get us off the road. So he got us turned around. We got off the road. We hit back on the trace, and we went maybe 4 or 5 miles down the road to where a public bathroom was in the park. It had a street light above it, and he was just gasping for air. I got out and helped him get out and gave him some water, and we sat there for maybe a couple hours just trying to let him get back to feeling better. It took him a week to get over that. He wasn't well for a week. I was in pretty good shape the next day. That was the strangest thing I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like that. You know, last October, a year ago, Small Town Monsters did a documentary with Martin and I on this particular creature that we've seen, and it came out this March. And there's a 3-part series on it, on that particular creature, the same location. We went back to it and filmed all that, and big shout out to Small Town Monsters, Seth Breedlove and Alexander and Heather, and all those guys are just super great. But I enjoyed working with them. But to this day, I've never seen anything like that in my life, and it was almost cartoonish. It was so strange, but it was a full creature. But how do you see through something like that? It was transparent at the same time. I don't know if I've heard people ask me, was it government made, or I don't know if government made it or not. I've never seen a creature like that, but But it was definitely a huge creature. The head on this thing was about half the size of the truck windshield. It was massive, and I'll never forget the mane, like a line around the head. And it looked like it was almost grinning at us when it was laying in the ditch or the ravine there next to the culvert. But I don't scare very easy. Never have. I probably should be that way with all the stuff I've been around over the years. But that was the most terrifying thing I've ever been through. That thing was the meanest, ugliest looking thing I've ever seen. Still to this day, I've never seen another Bigfoot like that. But it was called a woodbucker. This particular creature here impacted me, but in a different way. More like a little bit more cautious than I was in the LBL before. I know that definitely did that to me there because that was the second Dogman I'd seen in the LBL, and the other one was nothing like that one. I would say that the biggest difference between that one and my first encounter with Bigfoot is I didn't feel as fearful. I know it probably sounds crazy, but I didn't feel as fearful as from that Dogman as I did from the Bigfoot on my first experience. So maybe it was because it was my first experience, but it took me a long time to get over that. A good 7 years before I could. If I had met the forest people on the Cumberland River in Tennessee that became my friends, a different type of the Bigfoot type creature, and I do believe there's a difference between Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and the forest people. I think they're different. I think they're an ancient people, but that one was so kind and it was real family. They were never aggressive. They trusted me. I trusted them. And we had a really good relationship for nearly 4 years. And if it hadn't been for them, I don't think I'd ever got over my first encounter. But this encounter was completely different, though. It was quite like nothing I've ever witnessed or seen before. It's I still don't understand how it could even be possible to even see what I've seen.
That's a good answer because I mean, what are you supposed to do with this stuff? And I don't know where to put it, what to do with it. It's such a strange encounter, probably the strangest encounter I personally have ever heard. And, I could see how it would affect you and impact you differently. But, you mentioned the radiation, what people call getting zapped, and you guys think it could be radiation. And I tend to think that that's probably true, but why do you think they have the ability to do that, man? What do you think that's about? Do you think that's just like a defense mechanism, or do you think they do it as a threat?
We've had this conversation on many a time. Ron Moorhead, myself, Barton Nunley, and of course Martin Groves, because we stay in a certain cabin in the LBL when we go down to research, and we have all kinds of Bigfoot around our cabin. It's incredible. It'd blow your mind. Barton couldn't even believe all the Bigfoot around our cabin. They were breaking limbs and it was crazy. There were so many of them. So it's I think that the radiation factor and where this came up, I've been zapped 3 times in my life. Twice by Bigfoot and once by this Dogman, the story I just told you. Martin has been zapped that I know of at least 5 or 6 times. Twice in 2022, March of 22, the same night that he and Barton and I were together in an area 23. It's called Area 23 that nobody ever spent the night in. We stayed there. We had Dogman surrounding us. And Martin went out and just he didn't want no more of it. And he went out and just, I can't even explain. It was so crazy.
It's such a strange world, man. I don't know what you're supposed to do with this stuff, but while you're on that topic, man, if you don't care, would you mind sharing that story and those encounters with us? What happened that night?
Well, we were taken by a guy that supposedly knows the LBL as good or better. He's supposed to be the top guy in the area. And as far as knowing the area, I'm not saying that he's the top researcher or nothing like that. He just knows all the areas. He knows stories and encounters that happen in certain areas. I don't mind telling you his name. His name's Mark Maychek. He's a great guy. He's one of Barton's close friends. He knows Land Between the Lakes. I don't think anybody knows LBL as good as Martin Groves does, but I'd say Mark Maychek knows more strange places than he does because, Martin knows areas that we've been in or he's been in where these creatures are. Mark Maychek just knows the overall park, all the locations, how to get there and how to get back without getting lost. And he knows lots of stories of people in there that were terrified, didn't go back. And, we went in there and That was in March of 22. You know, it was before October of 22 when Martin and I had our encounter I just spoke of, and you know, we were in there, us three, me, Barton, and Martin, and we had went to area. He had told us, he goes, "There's one spot that I'm going to take you to, and I'm telling you, you don't need to stay here." He said, "Matter of fact, I'm leaving at dark. I won't be here." And I said, "Okay, take us there," and he did. He took us to that spot, and we were in Martin's big Suburban, and he backed it up in there and parked it, and of course we built a fire and everything else, and he had dinner with us. We cooked a big dinner that evening, right before dark, and right when it got before dark, he said, "I'm going. I'm leaving. I'm not going to be here at dark because I know what's in here, and I'm advising you guys to leave." And we stayed. You know, we wanted to see what it was that was harassing all these people in the area, and not that we're super brave. We're just more curious, I guess, than we are with common sense. But we've done that a lot of times. So he left, and we had a Bigfoot on the hill to the left of me, behind a huge cedar tree that watched us probably for 3 hours. He just had his head stuck around the tree and just looking at us. And he was probably 60 yards from us. Easy to see, though. I kept showing Martin. I said, "Martin," I said, look to the left. He's still looking at us. And we had been there that night, and right right when you just had finished dinner, and Martin he felt like he got zapped. His legs were numb. He wasn't feeling good. He was real upset at his stomach. His head was hurting. And we're probably, I don't know, at the end of another campground over there. There's a public bathroom, and you can go over there. And thought he was going to throw up, and he said, "You don't mind driving me over there, do you?" And I didn't. I drove him over there. I left Martin by himself. I said, "Don't go with me." "No, I'm fine. I'm fine." So I went ahead and took him over there, and he came out, and we came back to camp. He got sick again. I run him back over there one more time. When you get zapped by one of these creatures, it makes you feel like you want to throw up, is the only way I can put it. I mean, you have tingly legs. They feel like they went to sleep. They're numb. You have a headache. You feel like the Bigfoot to me was more my stomach. The Dogman was more my chest. But Martin was sick. He'd been hit twice that night, and I don't know how we weren't hit, but he was. He was sick enough that he was in his vehicle with the front seat reclined back, and he was trying to get to feeling better. He had the windows down, and we were talking to him. You know, it was an area you could pull up there in the woods is where he was backed up in there. And we're probably, I don't know, 50 or 60 feet from his vehicle with the campfire going in the woods. And, you know, we had just got through having dinner, and I told him, I said, "Let me run you back down there again, let me know." And he said, "No, I'm good right now." So he was laid back, kind of resting. He got to feeling better. Well, I lose all service there with my cell phone. I don't have any service when I'm at LBL. I mean, I don't have any. I have to drive out 15 miles or so before I can contact anybody. My phone won't work. We've been sitting there. It was getting later at night. I looked at Barton and I said, "I got a weird feeling about this night." He said, "Oh, I do too." And he goes, "I think we're going to have a lot of action." And I said, "Oh, I know we're going to have action. I feel that." And it was probably about 11 o'clock when it all started. And we could hear these dog man howling all over everywhere. You could hear them howling way off to the right. I remember it was like it was a minute ago, like a hollow over or another hollow over. You could hear one howl, then you hear another one howl behind us across the lake, which was at that time of year, it's what's called summer pool there. So right behind us, there was a portion of the lake, and it was only maybe a foot deep. You know, it was so shallow where they drained the water. It's called winter pool instead of summer pool where they raise the water. And I could hear something running through the water, running across from one side to the other, and it sounded like I thought it was one of the dog men coming across the water. I heard 3 or 4 of those coming across the water. Now we're out there in the middle of nowhere. There ain't nobody out there but us. And you're hearing something run right across the water, you know, in the shallow water, like make that sound. And we're hearing these dogmen howling to the right, to the left, and I looked at Martin. I said, "Are you okay?" And he says, "I'm fine. I'm fine." And I went back and I was sitting next to Martin. I said, "Oh, you better get ready because they're coming in." We could tell they were getting closer. And Martin had his big sword with him like he always does. And I'm pretty nervous, because I haven't never heard anything like this before. All these things howling close by and coming. They're getting closer. The howls are getting closer, and about that time, my phone rings, and my phone won't work. But it literally rang 3 times. I thought, how could that be possible? My phone's working. Martin's looking at me. Martin's looking at me, and I answer it. And it's a friend of mine who's in my group. That's one of my admin, Beth Collinsworth. She has the most psychic type ability that I've ever known. She literally can just feel things happening and feel the presence of things. And I was first of all amazed how she could call me because nobody else can. And I said, "What are you calling me for, Beth?" She goes, "Y'all need to get out of there right now." And I said, "What are you talking about?" She didn't even know we were even there. She goes, "I'm telling you right now, you've got dogmen all around you, and you've got a feral man to the left of you." I said, "A feral man? What are you talking about?" She goes, "Yeah, there's a feral man with these dogman creatures. Y'all need to get out of there right now." And I said, "Okay, Beth, thanks." And she goes, "Well, don't hang up. Don't hang up." And I said, "Well, I need to be doing something besides talking on the phone. I'll call you back, or you call me back because I can't call out." And I hung up. I'm telling Martin and Barton, they heard her what she said. They're kind of nervous thinking we're surrounded by dogmen and we got a feral man. I never heard that before in the LBL. So these things are getting closer. I can hear them howling. I mean, they literally were close. I mean, loud enough that the Bigfoot disappeared. He went behind the tree. I don't know where he went. He was gone. And I looked up at Barton, and, of course, being in the LBL, you got to be really careful about carrying weapons because you're not supposed to have guns or anything in the LBL. So we try to abide by the laws. And Barton carries that big sword. And about that time, Martin opens the door of his Suburban. I could tell he was nervous. He comes walking right by us, right by the fire. I'm sitting there ready for these things to come in on top of us, just kind of at a position, and Martin is too. And Martin just walks right by me, walks right into the woods. I said, "Don't go in the woods by yourself, Bubba. Don't be going in the woods by yourself." He didn't listen to me. He went right by me, walked into the woods, and he starts chanting real loud, and I couldn't hear what he was saying really good because he was facing away from me and he was kind of in the woods, and I'm thinking, what is he doing? And about that time he turned around and comes back and he goes, "We'll be okay now." And he got back in his truck and laid back in his seat again. He wasn't feeling good. And I'm talking about, we didn't hear a howl the rest of the night. It was so quiet. You could have literally dropped a pin and heard something. You could have heard it. It was quiet, just like they left. And me and Barton were both looking at each other. What in the world had happened? How did you do that? And I looked at Martin. I said, "What did you do?" He said, "Yea, though I walked through the shadow of the valley." He said, "I spoke the tink. I spoke, I spoke God's prayer to him." And I was like, wow. And I'm talking about, it was absolutely amazing how these things just vanished. We didn't hear another howl the rest of the night. I've thought about this a many a time since that night. And matter of fact, a couple of days after that, I was on my mind constantly for a couple of days after that, just thinking, what if, but, and I talked to Martin all the way home, and I said, he said, "I was just told to do that, and I got up and done it, and it worked." It was amazing. It really was. It was truly amazing. I'm talking about, I went from a little fear level because I know these things are getting really close. And Barton, just looking in his eyes, Barton don't scare easy, and he was ready to fight his way out of there, whatever we had to do, and I was too. And it was just amazing how that really worked. The first dogman I seen was in Tazewell County, Virginia, in 2021. That was the first one I ever seen, and it was nothing like the creature that I seen with Martin. It was more like a massive black German Shepherd. That's what it looked like. A massive black German Shepherd, about 4 times the size of a regular German Shepherd. Just massive. And the head was so big. And it was so different. That looked flesh and blood to me, completely flesh and blood. Just like the Bigfoot I've seen, they've all looked flesh and blood to me. Now, I do think the Bigfoot and maybe even the Dogman. I don't know. I'm not an expert on anything. I can promise you that. But I do think that Bigfoot has a way to, some of the things I've witnessed them do, especially with the family I had on the river. They have a higher vibration than we do, and they can raise that to a certain level, maybe a higher frequency than we know of. I'm not even sure that may not be into the fourth dimension or something. I'm not a scientist, but some way they have a way to change themselves, and I do believe they're able to do that. I think they can transfer themselves into cloaking or whatever. I'm not sure that Dogman may not be able to do that. Some of them, I don't know. I've never seen one, but the Dogman I seen in Tazewell County, Virginia, was flesh and blood. It was not a huge creature, about 6 foot tall, but it was built like a bodybuilder. I watched it cross a fence, and it had killed a lady's goats. I just luckily got involved in that by a gentleman at a store, came in and wanted to know if I knew about creatures, and I said I know a little bit, I know everything, and I went out there. But the one Martin Drozen I seen, and the one I seen before that one, well, I'm sorry, after that one, I've seen another Dogman since that one, but it was more flesh and blood too. That creature, I don't really know what it was. I know it was a Dogman type creature. I don't know if it was possibly a man-made type creature or what it was, but it was the strangest thing I've ever seen in my life. It don't even hardly, make scientific knowledge sense for something to be a clear form of a creature or a beast and to be able to see through it at the same time. I don't really know. I don't have an answer. I hear people all the time, the government's making these things. Scientists have labs. They're working for the government. That may be true. I don't know. I don't have any evidence of any of that. But I'm sure that it has went on because quite frankly, I don't trust our government with anything. So it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't try to do something like that. I know during World War II, a lot of the scientists did experimental projects on animals and humans. So, and I'm sure it's still going on somewhere. Most of these creatures, there's one thing you can always remember. If you're in a bad position, I was lost in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I don't remember what year that was, but I was absolutely scared to death. I was lost. I was in there for 6 days. I was lost for 3. And the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia go for thousands of miles. I mean, there's nothing but trees, trails, and creeks. I was very lucky to find my way out, and thank goodness I did. But I learned that all these creatures, if you're going to get out and research and go into the woods, remember this one thing: they all know what Jesus Christ is. If you let them know that you are faithful and you believe in Jesus Christ, and you ask them, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus Christ," I assure you, it's the best weapon you can carry in the woods.
That is the best advice that has ever been given on this show. I believe that 100%. I think that there is ultimate power in the name of Jesus, and that's the authority over anything in this world. And I'm like you, man. Like there's so much out in the woods. I don't go hunting anymore. But if you keep that in your back pocket, and you know that that's what you got to do, you're gonna be just fine, man. And that is, like I said, the absolute best advice you could give. And Daryl, I can't thank you enough for coming on here, sharing these encounters. I know, man, you have offers every day to come on podcasts, and I appreciate you taking the time to come forward on Mysteries Unknown and just share those stories with my listeners. And I know they thoroughly enjoyed that, man, and I did too, and I really appreciate it.
I was just driving down the road, and I was coming back from my friend's house, heading up to my mother's house. And I went around a corner, stopped at a stop sign, and then went around the corner, and I saw, just to give you a time frame, or a time frame on exactly, like, as far as darkness goes, I would say it was probably sunset. Just to give you that, So it was like sunset, and I got the lights on and driving down the road, and I go to make my turn, and I see this creature that's probably 4 feet high with two brilliant red eyes, like almost like fire. I mean, they're like 50-cent pieces, and so it's like on all fours, and I kind of pulled over off to the shoulder of the road, across from the white line, and this in front of this sign, probably 8 feet in front of me, in front of my car, and I figured could be a deer. I didn't know what it was, so I threw my brights on, and when I did that, I got like I saw the full frontal of this creature, and it was about as black as this, with like the skin was this black. So it was I didn't have any fur on the front, and it had a big mane on its neck, like a big, looks like I don't know, I guess you would, like a tiger mane, and I remember two pointy ears and 50-cent piece size red eyes. And then it stood up. And what I mean, when it stood up, this almost, I don't know. I don't know if it was either a dogman or a werewolf. It stood up next to this sign, and I know road signs are about 8 feet tall because you got to figure, you got semi drivers and whatnot, and them signs got to be at least 8 foot tall. And the head of this creature was approximately 6 inches taller than that road sign. And it's it was 8 foot in front of me, and I kind of just sat there, just dumbfounded, baffled. Um, at that point in time, I didn't even know these things even existed. Um, I was in awe. I didn't know what really to do. I was just kind of holding onto the steering wheel, looking at this creature, trying to figure out if I'm seeing things or is this actually presenting itself to me. And I watched, and it felt like, I mean, what my encounter felt like was forever, but it probably was solid 45 seconds, from when it had stood up. Um, so it stood up, is staring at me. It looked towards the woods. Now, mind you, the woods is 80 yards away, and on the other side of the road is a golf course. And it looked back at me, and I swear to God, it felt like it was staring through my high beams into the car, right at me, directly at me, and then snapped its head back towards the woods and leaped all of 80, or sorry, not 80. It leaped probably 20 to 30 yards, and then from literally a standing, sit down, turn, and then turn back and leap 20 yards. and then leaped again another 20 yards. And then the last time I saw it, it leaped 40 yards, and it disappeared, gone, and back into the woods. I guess for a description, I would say this creature was, 8, 8 to 9 foot. Looked like, I don't know if your viewers watching their wrestling or not, but I would say like Great Khali with like John Cena arms. It was just jacked right out, like melons, like cantaloupes for pectoral muscles and melons for arm muscles. And the one thing that kind of, I don't know, the one thing that really got to me was the way that when it jumped, it reminded me of how, like, if you've ever seen a rabbit in the woods and they bounce, it was kind of like that.
That is a really traumatizing event. And one of the first questions I always like to ask my guests, and I know we're going to talk about this second encounter. We're going to get into that in just a second because it's so wild to me. But with that first encounter and not knowing what these things are, hey, man, how did that affect you from that point on? Being that young, man, how did that affect your life?
How it affected my life, on an emotional state, it caused me to have dreams. I dreamt about this creature for probably 6 months. I tried to take everything that I could do not to re-visualize this creature. I tried to suppress this image, this whole memory. I've tried so hard to suppress, what I could get away from to get away from it, because my encounter was so terrifying. At least in my eyes, it was, because um, how did it affect me? Physically, I don't generally drive at night. Even to this day, if, like, I mean, I know that, I don't know. I mean, sometimes I think to myself, if I don't drive at night, then I won't come across this. But that's just how I feel. I think the realization of it all, the encounter itself, it took about 90 to 180 seconds. They kind of have my brain process what I just saw. Before I put the car in the drive and ended up driving back to the house. Yeah, the realization of it, I guess it didn't really kick in until like, I would say about 6 or 7 minutes after my encounter, when I saw it staring back at me. I want to say it had a large snout, teeth that were probably canine teeth. I don't know, 6 to 8 inches long. Pure white, like white, like abnormally white teeth. You know what I mean? Like kind of bone. Well, I mean, teeth are bones, but like, I don't. I don't know. Yeah, it was abnormally white teeth. The creature, as far as, um, I remember the red eyes, and that just put instant fear into me. Um, I remember, yeah. It. I tried so hard Not to kind of change the subject about the animal features, but to kind of give you let's see, it's like what do I really kind of compare this thing to? And it's like there's nothing to compare it to. There was, a lot of people have said like Anubis, and I'm like, no, this thing's mouth was like, it wasn't long and skinny. It was like thick and wide, and and I had normally long teeth, and it never. My whole encounter, because I was inside the car with both windows rolled up, I didn't know if it ever made a sound when it leaped off the ground. Um, I didn't hear anything. Okay, I didn't hear anything when it jumped 8 feet from me, which is super abnormal. An 8 foot creature, you would think you would hear something. You think you would see dirt fly. No, it was like on springs. You know what I mean? I mean, that's just um like I said, it jumped like it was a rabbit. It had that leap, and then it just leaped again, and then it leaped the last time, and it was in the woods. But yeah, it was super. It was black. It was black, like black.
That's a life-changing event, and it's something you probably never will forget, because it's just, those things aren't supposed to be there, like we said. And for that thing to jump like that and not hear it, man, these things got to be more than flesh and blood to have those kind of abilities and to do these kind of things, in my opinion. But I know that there's a whole other part of this story, that we'll jump into, man. Fast forward to 2024, still in Michigan. Tell our audience about this encounter.
So with this encounter, it was a little different. I was home. I was alone. It was probably 2 or 3:30 in the morning. I like to stay up. I like to stay up at night. Um, but I like to stay up at night and not be on the roads. Obviously, inside the house, sure. Um, but anyways, yeah. So I was up and uh, whatnot. And I was watching some movies on TV, and it was Saturday, and um, I was up here in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. So I don't know if any of your viewers are kind of central Michigan, but I had this overwhelming sensation, like I was being watched, and like all the hair on my neck was standing up, and I had like this feeling like I had goosebumps, and all I really can remember is I kind of like grabbed my phone from the shelf that was next to me, and I kind of sneak it up next to myself, and I'm taking photos from my couch um, out my window, because that's where I'm having this overwhelming sensation, like something staring in, watching me. Um, and come to find out, 24 hours after I, go to sleep, I get up, I walk into the bedroom, I think, okay, well, maybe it's just my own paranoia. Maybe I'm just paranoid. It's late. Shut the TV off. I walk around. I go into my bedroom, close the door. I'm just like, yeah, maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. I I go to bed and I wake up. It's like 10:30. I'm like, kind of curious to, what was on that, you know, all the 22 photos that I had taken. And every photo was the same photo of the same creature from the previous encounter. And mind you, 2017 to 2024 is, you know, quite some years apart from each other. And I don't know if it was exactly the same creature, but it felt like it was. I had that same, you know, fear that I had felt previously in my first encounter. So that's pretty much that.
I was coming home from work, and that night I work night shift, so I get home about 12:30, 1 o'clock at night. Um, so I get home, get on my truck, and that night it was clear. It wasn't really rainy, windy, or anything like that. It was just quiet. And usually, we'll hear owls or some frogs because we were living pretty close to a lake at this time. Uh, but that night when I got out of my truck to go into the house, it was just dead quiet. There was no frogs or no owls. It was just dead silent, like you could hear a pin drop. So it was just weirdly quiet. So I was like, something's not right. Maybe a bear's in the area, maybe a cougar's in the area. Because we have seen those, and there has been reports of them being in the area. So as I'm walking up to my front porch, the hairs on my neck stand up, and I'm like, I feel like something's watching me, and I've never felt this before. So it freaked me out. So I booked it. I ran straight for that front door, unlocked it, got inside, shut the door, and locked it. And felt better after that. Dogs weren't barking. We had two Yorkies at the time. They were probably about 10 months old each. They were in their kennels by the front door. And they weren't barking or anything. Usually, if we've had something in the area, they'll kind of growl or bark. But they're quiet, so I'm like, okay, nothing to really worry about. So, took my shoes off, took all my work stuff off and went straight to my bedroom. Usually when I get home, I'll watch some Netflix, just to kind of simmer off, cool down, relax before I go to sleep. My roommate, who was my really good friend at the time, we work in the same place, but he works days, I work nights. That way we can, take care of the dogs and they're not by themselves for 8 hours. Well, he's sleeping, and I go in my room and start watching some Netflix. And about 20, 30 minutes go by, and the dogs just go absolute ballistic. So I go out there and I yell at them, like, hey, there's nothing out there, quiet. Um, I knew they didn't have to go to the bathroom because we've kind of trained them to not need to go out at night. They go out when he gets home and he potties them before he goes to bed, and then they should be good until the morning. So I go out there, hang out with them for a bit, got them to cool down, go back into my room, and about 10 minutes after that, they start going crazy again. And within 5 minutes of them starting up to bark again, we hear a loud bang on the house. Now, what we were living in was a 70s trailer that we were renting. So it sat off the ground a good, 5, 6 feet because it's still got its tires. But we hear this loud bang against the house, and it wakes my roommate up because it shook the house. And I was like, I don't know what that was. He was like, you know what? Grab your gun. I'm gonna grab my gun. Let's go investigate outside. I'm like, all right. So I grab my gun. He grabs his, and we go to the front door. And he's like, all right, I'm going to just open it wide up really fast. You watch my back. I'm like, you got it. I'm locked and loaded. Let's go. So he swings that front door open. And on this trailer, it had a screen door that was partially glass and partially just screen. Well, it's got one of those hydraulic things on it to help close it when you would, open it and let go. So that rod was bent 90 degrees, keeping this door open against the house. It left a dent into the house itself because it wasn't, wood. It's metal siding. There is a dent in it, and that rod is bent 90 degrees, so that door will not shut. And we were looking at that, and we're like, there's no way a person could have done this, and there's no way. And, we go out there, we turn on our flashlights, we, rack both guns, getting them ready, because we figured, okay, there's got to be a big animal in the area, and it's probably still around, so we need to be ready to put it down if it comes after us. So we go down the steps, and it's pitch black. So out there in Seebeck, there are no street lights. When it's dark, it's dark. You can't see more than 5 feet in front of you. So we're walking around the property. We don't see any footsteps at the time. We don't notice anything different. Garbage cans weren't touched, which we thought was odd. Because usually if, maybe we were thinking it was a bear. And usually bears will go right after the trash cans. Because I know our trash cans, they were full at this time. I knew the garbage day was the next day, but garbage cans were not touched. So we thought that was a little odd. So we kept going around the house, and we didn't see anything. So we were like, what, screw it. Let's go back inside, and let's just hang out with the dogs for a bit, because we were both pretty shaken. And we hung out for about an hour. He was like, all right, I'm going to go lay down. Okay, I'm going to go lay down too, but I'm keeping my gun with me. He's like, yeah. Next thing I hear is, I just checked the camera. Something ran in front of the camera. I'm like, well, what ran in front of the camera? He's like, dude, I've never seen anything like this. And we looked at it, and it was something with dog legs running on 2 legs, and it ran past the camera. And that's going in front of the house alongside the shed. And once it gets alongside the shed that we had, you can't see anything more in that camera. But we had another camera in the shed. That way, if someone tried to break into our shed and try to get her toys, we would be able to catch them on camera. But we were able to pick up something on that camera, just noise, because it would do audio and picture. We were able to get audio of it slamming against the shed and running through and then just disappearing. That freaked us out. And this thing had to have been 7, 8 feet tall from what we could tell from video. And that freaked us out. And we didn't sleep the rest of the night. We stayed wide awake, holding our guns. We're like, okay, if it comes in, we're putting this thing down. When we go outside the next morning, we're looking around to see what damage it may have done to the shed, because we didn't want to go back outside after seeing what we saw on the camera. Unfortunately, though, with that camera, it doesn't hold recordings more than 24 hours. So unfortunately, we could not save that recording. I wish we could have, because that was just incredible watching on camera. But I still have the recording or the audio of it slamming against the shed. That I was able to keep. But when I went outside and was looking around, I noticed something on the glass of the window that was next to the shed. And at that night, we had all our drapes open. So if anything wanted to look through the window and look into the house, it could. Well, looking at the window from the outside, I'm 6'3", and where this thing I saw in the window, it looked like a nose print. So if you ever had a dog put its nose up against the glass and leave a mark, that's what I saw. But even with me reaching my hand all the way up, I couldn't really reach where that print was. And, even me trying to look through the window, I kind of have to go up on my tippy toes. And this mark was about halfway up on the glass. So it had to have been 7-8 foot tall. Looking into the glass, and what made me think was, okay, maybe he was looking in the glass last night, saw the dogs, wanted to get the dogs, so it came around to the door and rammed that thing open to try to get into the house. Now, I don't know why it didn't try to go through the wooden door that was next, because it didn't have a deadbolt. It easily could have just knocked that thing down and come right in, but it didn't. So it makes me think that when he slammed that thing open, that the noise scared him. I don't know. But, we continued to look around the property. We didn't see any footprints. It wasn't really muddy, so I wouldn't think any prints would be left. But we hadn't had any incidents for a few days. I was coming home from work early that day. And as I was driving down my private road, I noticed something in the bushes on my left-hand side, and it was just, from what I could tell, it was a giant wolf head, and it was looking right at me from the bushes. And I'm in my truck driving towards it, and I'm like, you know what? If that thing comes out, I'm going to floor it. I'm going to run this thing over. I don't care. I'm in a truck. What's that thing going to do to my truck? So I kept going, and it still stayed there. It locked onto me, watching me. And as I am pulling into my driveway, which is on the right-hand side, he was on the left-hand side of the road. He took off into the woods, just flat out disappeared. I ran into the house. I grabbed my gun. I came back out looking for it, but it was already gone. And since then, I have not seen or heard anything. And this was early November that all of this happened. So that coming June, we called it quits, and we packed our things up and we left because we didn't want to stay another year in that house because that scared us. So I ended up going to family. He ended up going back to family, and we just left. And we just haven't talked about it. We haven't told anybody. We did tell some people, but we ended up telling people that it was a bear, and we didn't want to tell people that it was a wolf type Dogman thing because we didn't want to get made fun of and think that we're crazy. I definitely will not go out in the woods without a gun, or by myself for that matter. Yeah, I won't go out in the woods by myself or without a weapon, period. I haven't really gone out in the woods since then. I've had friends ask me like, "Hey, we're gonna go for a hike. You want to go?" And it's like, no, I don't really want to go. It's definitely scared the crap out of me for sure. It was definitely black brownish hair. Granted it was nighttime and it was a night vision camera, but it didn't really pick up the best details. It wasn't a 4K camera. But it was tall and it was running on two legs, which it was just huge. It definitely had long legs. You could see its claws on its hands. Couldn't really see the feet too well just because it ran so fast. But it definitely looked canine that was on two legs. You could see a little bit of, really broad shoulders. You couldn't really see a whole lot of muscle, but it was pretty big. But it was I can definitely tell it was brown/black, especially when I saw it in the daytime. Just its head, it was definitely black and brown. I don't know if it was the same one. I'm gonna have to assume so. I'm assuming he probably never left because he didn't get his dinner that night. My thinking is that it just wasn't my time to go. If that thing had its intentions of wanting to take me out that night, I think God stopped it from happening.
I used to live over in Seattle. Actually, it wasn't Seattle at first, but then I moved to Seattle. Started out on the peninsula side, over at a place called Paulsbo, and so I'm really familiar with the area out there in Washington State. Lived there for a while. So I developed a friendship with a fella that we have a lot of the same interests as far as, motorcycles and, pew pews and, just a lot of stuff like that. And he went through some personal stuff and had to move back to Oklahoma. And long story short, he calls me up one day and he says, "You got to watch this video." So it ends up being the How to Hunt with Steve Eisenberg. I forget his name. Steve something or other, the How to Hunt guy. Anyway, so he goes on, starts telling this story about my buddy's experience. And my buddy the whole time has known about them, know they exist, and never saw one. And he's woodsy. This guy, I'm telling you, if there's any person that spends more time in the woods than him, knows the woods, I'd love to meet that man and learn from them too, because this dude knows his stuff. And when he said he went out there, he has a Tacoma pickup with a tent in the back of it, so he was sleeping in the back of his truck. And he said he had some of the, what do you call it, the Sierra sounds and the samurai talk and all this going on, and trees shaking and things being thrown. And so I went out there and I saw his site. I flew all the way out to Seattle and rented a truck just to go hang out with him for a few days. And so we load up the truck, we go out there. He's got a place out on the ocean, out near Ocean Shores. So we load up there and we go out towards Hump Tulips. We go view his site. This is October, mid to late October 21st or 22nd, I think it was. We go out there, we go on his trail, and we sit there, and nothing happened. And it was just humdrum. We went, found a few mushrooms, and walked around, and we were sneaking up through this draw that has water in it, and so that constant sound of water. He seems to think if you're going to sneak up on one, it's going to be around water, because of the noise or something. And so nothing happened. We go back, jump in the truck. Well, if it wasn't the next day, I mean, he had to work, so I go out and running around in my truck, and I got my drone and everything sitting next to me, my camera, set up on the drone controller sitting right next to me. I drive around all day. Nothing happens. I go back and hang out with him, eat dinner and what have you, and I got another day of this. I'm driving heading from Chimacum, Washington. I'm heading into where the John Wayne Marina is, because I had another kind of cool thing happened to me years ago when the very first time I went to the John Wayne Marina. So I was just going to go out there and see if anything's changed. I was sightseeing. I'm there on vacation, whatever. I'll spend the day out there, fly my drone. And I get into Chimacum, and I forget the highway that runs through Chimacum, but one that runs it will take you to that area. And I remember there's a truck there that's always parked on the right of way, on the edge of the right of way. They use it for like advertising. There'll be flowers in it. There'll be signs, bush hogs, whatever, just whatever. They change it, and sometimes they sell fruit or something out of it too, fruit or vegetables. And I just know it's coming up. I've ridden that thing. I've ridden past that area 30, 40, 50 times. And as I pop over this hill and where that truck ought to be, and the very first thing in my mind was, who put an 8-9 foot tall Sasquatch cutout in the right of way, and how big is that frame got to be to hold and support that thing? And I'm just kind of shaking my head, like, because it's in the right of way. You can't leave stuff in the right of way. But then again, October 21st, Halloween's coming. My mind's like, oh yeah, that's what it is. Somebody's put a Bigfoot theme. They're going to have a haunted house, a spook house, whatever's going through my mind. And I remember that Mini Cooper's going, and there's another car coming right at him, and they pass. And as soon as they pass, this thing walks right in between them, 3 strides. And then I'm thinking Halloween, somebody's got some stilts on, and I'm thinking, no, wait a second. that head, conical head, squashy, kind of looking down, like big shoulders, kind of, big head, big long arms, big, like freaking muscular, like hands. And as it walked, I remember seeing a reflection of the sun that would have been coming pretty much, I don't know where. Actually, it was heading from west to east. And at that time, the sun would have still been coming up because it was 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. And I remember its hair was kind of flopping, and it made it kind of look like it was wearing chaps. The first thing I thought was a costume. Chaps would be a perfect way, something to kind of put fur on. Well, it was kind of like a reddish tan, or like the coyote tan of some of the military backpacks and stuff like that. And I thought, but it's just a different color, maybe even a golden color almost. And I thought, wow, that's weird. If that's a costume, that's something, And it just kept going. And next thing you know, it disappears, and those cars just keep going. And I think, well, they must have saw something that I didn't see, and they know it's just because if surely they would have hit their brakes or something if they had noticed that. They just kept going. So I kind of was starting to brush it off completely. And then as I went down that road, and the name of the road, I can tell it to you now, and it's called Nip Lee Road. NIPLEE Road. And it was walking from west to east. You'll figure it out. And it just crossed. And as I remember passing that road, now it's slowed down to probably 45, 50 miles an hour by now. And I remember turning and looking and seeing that thing walking, thinking, that's no, because it's moving so fluid, so smooth, like butter. Its hands stayed below its knees, and it just kept walking. And I turn around. Well, I didn't really turn around right there. I think I drove about another 3/4 of a mile and just shaking my head like, no. Dude, I'm by myself. I don't, my drone's put away. The day before I had it out, my drone's put away. All I got is my cell phone. It's in my pocket. And that day I couldn't get anything to charge past 60%. That's something I remember that. And that went on the next day as well. When I was looking down that to my right, and it's kind of ironic, this picture at the bottom of this screen, the Mysteries Unknown screen that you have Bigfoot looking over its shoulder, you see how you've got the veins in the arms there? Well, this Bigfoot, down its back, it appeared to have, I can't explain it in any other way than saying it's cornrows. Braided rows of hair vertically. And I don't mean like haphazard, like a 3-year-old, 4-year-old's messing with mom's hair. I'm talking like go to wedding, like it was shiny, beautiful. There didn't appear to be a tuft out of place. And it appeared to be only maybe about 6 or 7 rows wide, but they were, good wide rows. And I thought, and later, after thinking about it after the incident, I thought, could that be plumbing? Could that be tubes? What is that? Is this, and that was hours after, I think. But, and so I just remember, I thought, oh, my buddy's not going to believe me. He's not going to believe me. He will not believe me. Absolutely. I know he won't. I'm kind of ashamed that I didn't, get my phone out and, the whole thing's going through my mind. Well, how could I miss this opportunity of a lifetime? This is only going to happen one time. God, how much of an idiot can I be? And I get home or get back to his place and I tell him, man, dude, he didn't really want to hear it. He really didn't want to talk much about it. He was like, no, you're just trying to taunt me. I stub my toe, you break yours kind of deal. So I just said, yeah, that thing was big. It was 8, maybe 10 foot tall. I think it's 8, 9 foot is what I told him, but it was probably 8, 10 foot tall. And I didn't tell him much after that. Cause like I said, you just stub your toe, break yours, and I didn't want to make a big deal of it. My belief was also something in my heart told me, don't start screaming Sasquatch right here, right now, populated area. Don't want nobody to know. I don't want nobody to track him down. I don't want nobody shooting at him. It's whatever it is, it's way smarter than me. And I don't want people tracking me down looking for me. And I just remember thinking, best leave it alone for a while. I don't think I told a soul except for a very good friend of mine. I told her and maybe my sister, and my sister, that's where it hurt. That's the one that hurt. When I told her about it and tried to tell my family about it, my heart sunk that day because the way they treated me over it. Like, and then, I said, no, man, there's no way. I just saw what I saw. I'm not, why would I make this up? I have no reason to lie. I should have jumped out of that. I was in a rental truck. Should have jumped out, looked at it, took pictures, but I'm not a Bigfoot researcher. I don't claim to be. I don't know what. Now I've got a track kit and things like that. I still haven't. I'm too after everything that's happened. I'm afraid to go in the woods by myself anymore. And then plus, I don't want to know any of those tick-borne diseases. So if I do go in the woods, I like to just kind of, go out in the wintertime,
I don't blame you for that. And, one of the consequences of having these encounters is it changes your relationship with the woods for a lot of people, and for good reason, and we'll get into the Dogman stuff in a second. That's a great reason to not go into the woods. But, out of all the encounters that I've personally heard, I've never heard of anybody describing the hair like that being braided. And it makes you wonder, it's just more things to this world that makes you scratch your head and try to figure out, man, that's such an odd thing. And I always wonder why they run out in front of cars like that, just nonchalantly. But what do you think it was doing in the area that day?
I think he was going to a function, a social event. Is what I think. I think he was either that. I literally wedding, some kind of like Sasquatch event. I have no idea. And I ain't gonna lie, beautiful. I mean, it was shiny. It wasn't no dirt. Wasn't no, like I said, no hair out of place. No, they ain't. I mean, they may have some animal in them. We have animal in us. We just shocked. How do you, what, like I said, a lot of disappointment in myself. Chalk it up to another experience, and thinking. I just missed, because if I'd have gotten that video of that, and if I'd have made that right-hand turn and had that drone, I could have maybe followed it for a while. And if I'd have had all that evidence, that'd be a different life right now. I'd be going to these festivals and shows and just, I don't know, charging people to see the video. I don't know how, what do you do,
I wouldn't beat yourself up over that, because, a lot of people have these encounters and grabbing the camera is an afterthought most of the time. You're in that moment, you're seeing something that's not supposed to be there. Your body's in shock. What are you supposed to do? Yeah, you don't want to take your eyes off of it, and you just want to, capture the moment. And, and I understand, like, the first time I shared my encounter with somebody, the disappointment I had and just how I felt, right? And that's why I started this channel, is to kind of help with some of that and get that stuff off of your chest, because it's really important. But, I know that we could go deep into that, but I really am anxious to hear about this Dogman encounter that you had. Man, why don't you take us into that encounter and walk us through that?
Okay. My encounter was October of 23. I'm blown away by Bigfoot right now. It's January, the second weekend of January, and I get the urge to just go out in the woods, ride my bicycle. It's cold. I know. I got a great set of coveralls. I got a puppy. I got to wear him out. When I was a kid, the family went up to Greenville, Missouri, and did some fishing, played a little ghost in the graveyard. There's like 6 graveyards in this area. So I remembered the area, and I was like, I'm going to take my bicycle, and there's a trail. It's a 3.5 mile trail. I'm going to take him out there, and we're going to ride 7 miles. That was it. We go out there I think it was the second weekend of January. And that's when we were having a lot of snow melt, a lot of rain, and a lot of flooding in this area. This particular area out near Lake Wapapello. This is actually, I used to think it was the Black River, but it's the St. Francis River. So it kind of follows where Greenville is. There's the town of Greenville is the newer town, the one you see now. If you punch and go to Greenville, Missouri, you're going to go into this little small town. I think there's like 800 people in this town. And but the old town of Greenville is down by the river, and they've pulled up a lot of the buildings, moved them up to New Greenville, and the Corps of Engineers was responsible for that back in, what was it, 1911 or 17, somewhere around that time frame. And so Corps of Engineers had to move, blah, blah, blah. People think that whole campground that's left behind with all the remaining structures, which is mostly 99.99% of it is old foundations, sidewalks, and a cemetery down there. But it's privately owned. But it's called the Greenville Recreation Area. And so I go down there that weekend, park my bike, start noticing these signs, park is closed. Everything past the boat ramp that goes into the campground underneath the bridge of 67 highway is closed. And I'm thinking, well, that sucks. That's where the trail is. I don't care. I got a bike. I drove an hour and 30 minutes. I'm not going to go anywhere else. So I put the Bluetooth speaker on the bike. Dogs got little leather booties on. iPro, orange vest, orange everything. It's, my coveralls and everything. We ride this trail. Go all the way into Greenville. I think I eat something at the I think it's like the Midway Cafe or Midway Cookhouse, I think is what it's called. So anyway, I go down there and I ride this entire trail. I had a great time. Listen to music, ride through the woods, get back to my truck. I don't think I saw anybody. I'm like, I'm going back. Maybe next week, and I'll just make this my little deal, So I go home. Thursday rolls around. I start getting ready, prepping a bag and all my stuff, throwing it in the truck. And Friday after work, drive by the house, pick up the dog, get something to eat, whatever I did. No, after work. That's right. It wasn't after work. I headed there early in the morning. I think I left out the second time. I left out at probably 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. Hour and a half drive. I get there. And as I'm pulling in, something weird happened. I remember as you're driving in to the boat ramp area, which is where I park almost every time I go there, unless I plan on sleeping there, then I go down towards the campground. I remember driving in, and as I was looking up and kind of to my right, it was like time advanced like 10 seconds, and I must have moved like 10 seconds farther ahead than what I was 10 seconds ago. And I just remembered, wow, that was weird. And I just kind of starts, in like not literally, but just start shaking my head kind of deal, like what just happened? And as I continued that look up and farther to the right, I see a red and black McDonnell Douglas MD 500 helicopter, also kind of known as a Hughes 500. It's got a lot of different models. Really cute little helicopter, 4 people, turbine. It's awesome. Anyway, I see it taking off, and I'm thinking, oh, farmer, whatever's looking at his crops, whatever. And as I finish this thing, thinking, wow, what a time thing. What was that all about? Why is the helicopter here? I go to pull into the parking spot, and I look down towards the campground under the bridge, and it's a good quarter mile, probably eighth of a mile at least, to where the campground starts, where there's kind of a parking area. And I look down there, and I realize there's people down there, and the signs are still up for park is closed. And I'm thinking, I didn't drive an hour and a half to go somewhere else. So I remember loading up my bike, Bluetooth speaker, orange vest, or an orange construction jacket. I'm sure everybody gets it. And if I'm outside, no, I wear orange a lot. So I was outside with him earlier. So it's not that it's my favorite color, but it's very practical. So orange vest, everything. My dog's in an orange vest. Put his little booties on him, all that. Look down there, and I realized that 2 of those cars, since I used to work for the Corps of Engineers, I knew that those were Corps of Engineer police vehicles. And there was 2 state game warden trucks, the Brown, Missouri, game warden trucks. Another truck with a trailer and a couple of ATVs, or at least one UTV maybe. I'm going to hold off on the UTVs, but definitely a fuel tank, maybe a 200, 300-gallon fuel tank on this trailer. And then right then I thought, oh, helicopter, trailer. I've seen this setup before. It's okay. They're inspecting the high water, the floods, because there was a lot of water. I mean, the boat ramp there, when I was there, I remember walking down to the boat ramp, and the water was maybe 4 foot down from where the boat ramp starts. So it was rushing water. It was just, there was a lot of flooding at the time. And so I thought, oh, maybe they're just inspecting the river for the flood, maybe structures, whatever. And so I get everything ready, and nobody comes and says nothing to me. I feel like an American. I'm going to take my leisure time. I'm going to go down here, get on the trail, and I take the trail that I know the best that leads me the farthest away from the parking lot. And I go past these guys. I don't even wave. I just have my dog. And at the time, I was trying to teach him off leash. He's not ready for it still yet. And that was 23, or 24, January 24, or no, January 23. Sorry, January 23. And so I just jump on my bike, blaring my radio, and now I'm playing tribal drum music as loud as that thing will go. Just American Indian tribal drum music. I pass them. I go into the woods. I go down there. There's a little sneaky spot where the trail kind of tees, and you can go towards the south, and that will be where the river is. And there's a park bench down there, and you can hang out. So I go down there, hang out the park bench for 10, 15 minutes, leisure time, kind of letting him get some water and everything. Load him up, and we start heading back down towards the new town of Greenville, get all the way into Greenville, grab something. I think I grabbed something to eat there when I was there at the cafe or at the cookhouse again. Didn't think nothing of it. Jumped back on the bike, start heading over to there's a bank there in Greenville. And I'd ridden my bike from the cookhouse over there with him on the leash, and I realized as I was going to release him off the leash to go down to the trail and head back down to my truck, he was coiled like he was ready to strike, like a dog. You know how when a dog locks up, they're just, every muscle in him's all locked up. And I thought, why is he locked up? And I remember I kind of looked up at the highway, and I thought, surely he's not, looking at cars. At the time, he had never chased a car. He hadn't done that. But I just remember he was really tense, just tight. And I let him loose, and he takes off towards the road. And I think, I'm going to lose my dog on 67 highway today. He's not coming. I get down to the trail, and I'm riding down the trail a little bit. There's a tin horn laid down there on the ground. And I remember I stopped pretty close where that thing's at now. And I stopped, and finally he just broke chase. Whatever he was chasing, he turned around and came back to me. And this time he came right back to me. And I thought, well, that's good that he did that. He ran all the way up to the right of way of the highway, stopped, did one little circle, and then turned around and came back. And I thought, well, leash time for you, buddy. Maybe not so politely said that. But anyway, I put him back on the bike, blasting my music. We start going down the trail like nothing happened. There's a tunnel that goes under the highway there just outside of Greenville that you can take your bicycle and go get to the other side of the highway without crossing the highway. And so we go through the tunnel. That's probably 400 or 500 yards from Greenville, maybe 600 yards from Greenville. And I thought, okay, he's learned his lesson. He's tired. He's not going to run from me. He's just going to run next to me. I'm going to let him off the leash again. I let him off the leash, and he has other plans. He takes off. When I let him off, he was coiled up tight again. I don't know why, but he was. He takes off. This portion is probably the worst uphill portion of it, and usually I have him pulling me uphill, and he since I let him off the leash, he wasn't happening. So I get up to the top of this hill, and I'm still yelling for him, and as I'm going down this portion of this hill, I start picking up speed. I'm on a 29-inch, mountain bike. So it's a really tall bike. I'm 6'4". I've got a pretty good advantage of everything that's going on. There's no leaves on the tree, and I'm looking for my dog to the left. And then I remember looking up, and I saw this gray mass, thinking it's a weird set of trees. The way they're nope. That thing had it seemed to me like when it was running, it seemed like it was running away from us. And it had stopped and turned at us at that exact second. And it turned and looked at Sabo and saw him, and it was kind of fixed on Sabo for half a second, and I must have yelled or looked up and yelled at Sabo. I wasn't yelling because I'm screaming like a 8-year-old girl or something, but I was yelling at Sabo, and I saw this, and then he turned, he looked at Sabo, and then he looked at me, and he turned to his left, whatever it was. At first I was thinking 7-8 foot tall jogger in the woods on a hill, no trail, shaking my head like what? Because this thing, it was massively tall. It turned and looked at me. I couldn't make out a face. It almost was like it had taken a couple of steps, like it was almost ready to bolt, but kind of was like almost like a stutter step, or I stopped it dead in its tracks and it was in the process of turning. But something was going on with it. And it looked at me, made this left face, and took off. But when I say take off, it has its right leg took a churn, no different than a train piston, an old steam train piston driven wheel, and was like chug, chug, chug. Did 3, maybe 3.5, 4 of those, and was booking it from my left on top of this hill, down this ridge line, straight through the trail. And I'm riding, I'm booking it, and I'm thinking, I'm dead. Whatever that thing is. I had my 45 on me at the time. That's not enough gun. I had 3 magazines altogether. 40, I think it's 41 rounds. It wasn't enough gun. I knew it as soon as I saw it. So I thought, if I'm gonna die today, I'm gonna ride into glory, whatever. I guess it's my day to die. And I start pedaling as fast as I can. This thing crosses the trail, stops behind a tree, does this, like this, but more spread out. It's way bigger. Looks at me, does a left step, drops its arms behind that tree. Not 2 seconds later, I pass within inside of 5 foot of that tree, and I turn and look over my shoulder. There's nothing there. The continuance of that terrain from the top of that, it's an old railroad grade. He drops down, it drops down, the terrain does, into this boggy, messy, nasty, it's a bog. It's no way to go to, it's all the flooding and everything. So if that thing was human, it didn't go down there. I stopped not 20, maybe 30, at the most 30 yards from where I saw him, and waited on Sabo to come down the hill. Sabo keeps coming down the hill, and he runs right to that tree, not to me. And then he comes to me, and I buckle him up, and we sit there for a good 2 minutes, looking, listening, look up the tree, nothing. Maybe not 2 minutes, maybe a minute. Things are going really fast in my brain right then. But we were sitting there, and then I was like, I don't even know what that is. At the time, Dogman, I had no idea. No, I hadn't even heard of a Dogman story. Have I heard of werewolves? Oh, yeah. Yeah, one of my favorite movies when I was a kid. Several of them. I like the older stuff. But anyway, and I just started kind of shaking my head, and I went to the next park bench right after. I mean, it's not 100 yards from where I saw it, and I stopped, and I know I sat there for a good 5-10 minutes. Nothing came to mind, not even Dogman. I had no analog. I had nothing to go off of. I never watched any of these shows. I just remember sitting there, and when I say recreate or recreation, I'm gonna burn one. I'm gonna smoke a joint. Is this thing gonna come after us again? What's gonna happen? I'm at a disadvantage. I'm 250 pounds. That thing, 700, 800, 900, massive. It was all gray. You remember the older sweats, those old gray sweats. That's the only color I saw. Now, mind you, there was kind of an overcast day. I'm also back to the Bigfoot. That day I saw that, I was wearing a set of green, these exact glasses. They're polarized green lenses. So now I'm starting to think maybe the polarization has something to do with me seeing those things. But anyway, back to the story. So I'm sitting there at this park bench, and I sat there for 15, 20 minutes, scratching my head and, entertaining my dog, because by now he was having nothing about it. And I think that is, what's this? So I load up on my bike and I ride the rest of the trail back, kind of a lot slower, and kept him on the leash and forewent the little side spur trail, the little quarter mile. It's probably like a quarter mile spur. I went straight back to the park, straightest route back. No, rode right past the game wardens and the Corps of Engineers people. I was probably 50 feet away, 60, 70 feet away. They were just sitting there with their arms, like tailgate session. They just made a couple of them. I don't even think looked at me. They maybe until I passed them. I just kind of waved, kept going. Didn't want to say nothing. Got down to my truck. Man, there's one more component to this. I get home. If it wasn't that night it had to have been the next night. I walked my dog to this one area behind the place where there's some woods and I can let him go. But there's this big kind of terrace. There's this terrace was basically a retaining wall that leads into a terrace piece of dirt. And I'm walking my dog up the hill towards that, but we're still at the bottom. And I remember I forgot my flashlight. And as soon as I thought no flashlight, I looked up to the trail, the exact trail him and I go in on, 20 yards in front of us. And a big dog. I don't know. I've been out there 100 times before and 100 times since, and I've not seen another dog in this area. A big dog on all fours runs into the woods. Don't have my gun, don't have my flashlight on me. I just go right back where I came from with me and my dog right inside. But this one was on all fours. It was big. It wasn't as big as what I saw, but it was big.
Poncho, I don't even know where to start, man. There is so much to unpack there. What a weird day. I mean, that's a lot there. And, in my opinion, I think you're very fortunate to be here to share that encounter and to tell that story. I mean, that's incredible being that close to something like that out in the woods. Do you think that everybody out there, the game wardens and the helicopters, you think that was in relation to that creature, or do you think that was just totally by chance?
I don't think it was totally by chance. What I think is the game wardens and everything, they were out there hunting hogs. The pressure that was going on those hogs forced the Dogman into that area. Being that I'm sure by now, anything that knows what humans do, spends that kind of time in the woods, knows the closer you get to civilization, the less gunfire. So I think it was using that area, and there's also, it might even live in that area. It might be based in that area. It might have been returning home from a night's hunt. I don't know, because there's maybe 5 or 6 cemeteries in that area. One of them is a Civil War soldier that is an unknown soldier's grave. There's another one in the park that I've mentioned before that's got several Civil War soldiers buried there. It's a very old cemetery where not the closest cemetery to where we were at, but the closest cemetery that wasn't the one in the park was, it's a very old cemetery. Let's just say I'm probably the first visitor in years. Because I went there afterwards and it was less than a mile from where I saw it.
That's something that pops up with these encounters is graveyards for some reason. You look at the LBL, man, the land between the lakes. I mean, that is like Dogman Central. And it seems like that, they're always in some kind of proximity to a graveyard for whatever reason, man. And who knows why that is. But, man, there's a lot to get into. But what do you think kept you alive that day, man? Because, I mean, if you were that close to that thing, it could have definitely got you if it wanted to. But what do you think kept you alive?
I think the fact that in my mind, I was like, look, I'm dead. I'm either going to have a great story or I'm going to be dead. And I just started pedaling harder. I think it realized in my heart that I'm not out to hurt it. If it would have reached out to grab me, the only thing I probably could have done is let it do what it do. I don't think there would have been time for me to get my gun out. I don't think my gun was enough. I think I was in the back of my mind, I was thinking, oh, great. Everybody's going to hear about me on David Paulide's stuff. Here I'm going to be gone, or I'm going to be a mess. I didn't think this that day. I just knew. I was like, I'm either going to be dead or I'm going to have a great story. I mean, I just don't know what to say about it. I know I've been back several times, and the area didn't spook me because when I saw it, now mind you, let me go much more through the description of what I saw. Very tall, very, very bowed chest, like a dog would have. Like you see a skinny dog, and you pick them up by the feet, and you just look at how bowed out their bellies are and how narrow their waists are. Well, that was kind of what it looked like. It was all gray. When I first saw it, it was all gray. It looked at first, I thought it was a jogger, like a huge jogger with headphones on underneath the hoodie, because it just looked like it had a pronounced head and a long, not even a long snout, not super long like a major, biting canine, but it had a snout. But I didn't really notice that until it kind of made that left-hand turn and then started running. I could just barely see a little bit of it because trees, it's flashing behind trees and branches and what have you. And I'm just watching this thing going down this hill, hoping it was going to run farther than the trail. But as it's running, I realized after that giddy up that it had, that little hitch that it showed in the first 3 steps, it wasn't really swinging its arms as much as those arms were out and just kind of doing this, I think, if I remember right. But its paws were like it tuck, like if you were a human, you tuck your thumbs in. It was like, that's what I was seeing, was it going down the trail kind of like that. And then when it turned and looked at me, it looked like its eyes were just like bandit eyes, like a raccoon, like diamonds, like 2 diamonds, merging diamonds. I can't do it. So anyway, that was a square. But anyway, diamonds. It just looked like 2 diamonds. And when it looked at me, I knew that wasn't the look that I needed to fear, but I was scared. I knew something told me when it looked at me, though, after it sank in, because I was pretty close to it when I started realizing I'm okay. If it hasn't moved by now, I'm okay. But I realized by looking at it, I just thought, I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel any anger, animosity. I didn't feel nothing but that I was scared. That's what I felt. But I wasn't scared. You know what I mean? I was just ready for that challenge. And if I lose, I lose.
Wow. I hear a lot of encounters, but these type of encounters really intrigue me. And I wonder if it had something to do with the fact that you had your dog with you as well, if that's one of the reasons this thing left you alone. And obviously if it, you could have definitely been a missing 411 case very, very easily. I'm glad you're not. And I think you're fortunate to be here to share that, man. After having that encounter and the Bigfoot encounter, man, how did these things impact your life on a daily basis?
Being a believer and being a knower, how can I put it? I started thinking they're targeting me. Not because, like, going back to the shadow that I've mentioned. That before the show, I don't think I mentioned it while being recorded, but I saw that as a kid. I saw that when I was 30 something years old. I came home to that. I was deployed. I remember coming home after I was deployed one night, after getting back into the country, and I went to go see my family, and I still remember seeing it there.
Why don't you back up a minute? And that's a good place to interject if you're open to it, and kind of walk us through that. Because here's the thing, I've been fortunate to interview a lot of people, and one thing that I really truly believe, man, is if you've seen one of these creatures, there's another one close by. I really believe that. Thirdly, I believe that if you've seen one, your chances of seeing another one go way up. And you could say for whatever reason, maybe it's just because you're aware of them or whatever that is. But I think you're onto something. I think that you see these creatures, your probability of seeing them go, in other words, just go way up. So talk us through that, kind of walk us through that when you were a kid, and we'll get back into this other stuff. But why don't you fill us in about that?
Okay. Well, it had to have been, I started Pee Wee football, and I don't know what year y'all started, but it's young here in Oklahoma. We follow Texas, right? And so I was pretty young, and I remember just one night going to a football game. I seem to remember it was pretty cold. A lot of my football games back then were cold. Matter of fact, our colors back then were orange and black. Anyway, that's no bearing. But so I remember coming around the corner of my house that we had in Oklahoma City. Well, Bethany is the name of the town. We had now I can't think of the type of tree. A really pretty flowering tree, like it's like an Asian. Anyway, a locust tree or something. I don't think it was a locust tree. I'll think of it here in a minute. Anyway, I remember passing around that with my mom, kind of coming around the corner and looking up and seeing this shadow. And I swear, and that's the day I swear it just all of a sudden, there it is. I don't remember it before that. I just remember seeing this shadow on the wall, thinking on the neighbor's house. There's Mr. Roberts lives across the road. His son Randy, him and I were really good friends. I remember looking up, seeing this shadow on his porch, but it was a shadow of what, at the time, I didn't even know what a Bigfoot was. I just remember it looking like what I know a Bigfoot is now. And I remember it was this horizontal Bigfoot on the wrought iron vertical support for his porch, and it looked like its hands were always on that. It didn't look like a shadow would, like how they move and get longer, and it never seemed to ever be any longer, any distortion in it all these years. And I'm talking from 5 to 30, 32, 34 years old. I might have been 30. You know what? I was 36 when I got out of the Army. I was 36. And so I remember asking my mom, I said, Mom, do you see that? She's like, what are you seeing? I said, there's something on the side of Mr. Roberts' house. What is it? And she's like, I don't see what you're seeing. And I thought, maybe it's just me. Yeah, I'm a kid, And I don't know when it was, but I eventually even asked Randy to come out. And I brought him outside now, because we were sitting around the back of the house, brought him around front and put him on the curb where from where I saw it. It was like, do you see anything on the side of your house? No, I don't. There's a shadow of this. He said, all I see is not the support. I don't remember what he alluded to, whatever it was, the vertical wrought iron support. Because I can't remember what we used to call them. I think we were calling them banisters, but that's not a banister. Anyway, so he said that we're climbing, he said, no, I don't see that. All I see is the shadow from that. I said, and a few days later, I brought Eddie over. Eddie lived across the street from Randy. And I said, hey, do you see this? No. It's weird. I like nobody sees this but me. So when that all happened, trying to get people to see it happened after I don't know that it was a dream. All these years I've thought it was a dream until I started seeing Bigfoot and Dogman. And so this is pretty recent. How can I put it? It just started hitting me like something's anyway. Well, the dream. I woke up from the dream. I remember sitting up in bed that night, sitting up for whatever reason, and like, I need to go look out the window. So, and for whatever reason, I just fell out of bed, crawled on all fours over to where my dresser drawers were, which was up against the wall that the front of the house was, that faced the road. And there's a big picture glass, like 6x8, whatever picture glass window there with about 1.5 feet, 18 inches, maybe 18 or so inches of framed in area down below that. And then there's the register for this. I remember just kind of pushing the curtains in the middle, right in the middle of them. I remember pushing them to the side, looking out there and looking for my shadow person. whatever it was. And there was 5 of them tonight. And I just kind of, as a kid, I was, whoa, what? And these things were taking that rail, climbing that rail all the way to the top of the house, might as well have been a conga line, making a line, jumping off, and then following each other and just doing a round robin of jumping off the house like it was something that was fun to do. And so as I kind of stand up, and because I'm trying to get away from this, and I remember it was the front door was open, and I'm pretty sure it was the summertime. And I remember standing there looking out the window, and if it was a dream, it could have been any time. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't a dream. And I just remember one of them saw me, and the third one had just jumped onto the ground and stood there. The second one followed the first one, but he only followed him to about the middle of the road. The third one walked all the way down all the way from the porch right to the front of the house, the porch of the house, and stopped and stared at me. Didn't make sound, didn't move, didn't threaten me, just looked at me, but its eyes were glowing red. And that's, I don't really, I guess you guys are getting a glare from that too. But yeah, its eyes were glowing red. And I just remember standing my ground, like, do you want to fight? I'm not running. So whatever you're going to do. And they just turned around and walked back to the house. And I don't remember now if they started doing the round robin again, or if I disappeared and went to the back room. The back room would have probably been where my dad was. I don't remember, but if I did that, I know I ended back up in bed. So I woke up the next morning and I told myself, if I tell anybody this story, they're going to think I'm crazy, and I'll have to deal with that forever. So I was probably 7, maybe 10 by the time this happened. And, because I know I was probably 10, 12 by the time I started asking Randy and Eddie and them about it. And it's something I've just kind of put in the back of my mind as that happened, but why? Is there going to be more, and eventually there was.
It's amazing to me how these things get unpacked in layers, and I know with mine, I buried my encounter until I had another one later on in life, and it triggered those memories and stuff. And I think these things are connected somehow. I think your experiences are all connected. I don't know how, and I don't claim to understand all this stuff other than there's a lot of things in God's universe we just don't understand, man. But I would be really curious to know what your thoughts are on what do you think Bigfoot is, and then what do you think Dogman is? Like, I would love to know what you think. And then, in your opinion, do you think all these things were connected that's happened to you throughout the years?
I'm going to say this. Yes, to everything's connected. Yes. I think there's a reason why. I don't know. I think that might have something to do with, and I say chosen one, and I'm sure I think I've been chosen for something, and I just haven't figured out what that something is. I don't know if it's them. I'm starting to come around more and more to the prospects of there being of this is all more galactically related. I think there is a God, and I love that dude like you wouldn't believe. I don't know that when he comes back, if he's going to look like you and me. He might be 22 foot tall. I don't know. He might be a ball of light. I don't know. That doesn't mean I don't believe in him, because he's in me. So I don't know why it's all connected. I know it is. Don't know why. We'll find out. As far as what Bigfoot is, it can only be one thing. Our relative. It's got to be humans, portions of it. The majority of it's got to be. I don't know about Neanderthal or whatever mixed in or this or that. And then going back to my Bigfoot sighting about the braids, the cornrows. Was that plumbing? Is Bigfoot just a biosuit for aliens? Maybe they use what you fear, things that you know of, things that, these little smatterings of history of reports that we get. That's another thing why I even went out to see my buddy in Washington's site, was because I know for years I've known there's too many people reporting these things, too many people seeing these things for them to be fake, for them to all be lying. So I've always known that, but I've never said they definitely exist until, what was it, October 21st of 23. No, I wouldn't have. I would have been like, that's a great story, dude. Because that's how I was like to my friend. I was like, yeah, hey, man, that's a great story. I wish you would have saw it. Wish, blah, blah, blah kind of deal. That's just awesome. I don't know what he is, but I think I know what he's not. I know he's not savage. If they were savage, we'd know. There would be no hiding. You'd walk out in the forest and just see Joe Blow, impaled on a tree. You would see massacres. You would see, you wouldn't want to go out in the woods much. If they were what they're not. They're not that. They're here for a reason. Whether they're left behind, whether they're guardians, whether there might be giants. This, maybe they're a devolved version of, maybe they're Goliath. The same thing we talk about in the Bible, Goliath. I don't know. But I wouldn't doubt, based on, I haven't even touched my UFO experiences with you. Because while I was in Washington, brighter than bright white light looked like it was tractor beaming little Tic Tacs into the bottom of it at the south end of Mount Rainier as I'm leaving, as I'm heading into McCleary, Washington. I think that highway's 12, 12 or 8. I don't remember. Was that a spaceship? I know it was a spaceship, because a ballistic missile won't turn that fast. And it was hovering for several minutes. There was 2 of them. But anyway, so Bigfoot isn't the things we should be fearing. If they wanted to, we would know they were there. They don't want the interaction. I don't know if they're in bed with the aliens or if they are the aliens themselves. Dogman, I think the Egyptians knew what he was. I think what I saw was what they saw. That's the first thing that I started looking for, and I started looking for, things other than werewolf. I don't know that they're the enemy of Bigfoot. I think maybe they know to steer clear. Maybe they're pets. I don't know, but you don't see them together.
I don't know. I don't have all the answers, man. I just know that there's a lot we don't understand. And, you brought up some really, really good points. And I think you're right, man. I think these things are definitely connected. And there's a reason for that. Who knows what that is? But, man, that's a pretty wild stuff. And, it's strange that you bring up the UFO stuff because, that is really tied into my encounter, my personal encounters and things that happen in the area. My dad had a UFO encounter when I was 5 years old, and I saw, these creatures within, 5 miles of where he had that encounter. And it seems to go in correlation with this stuff. And then, with Dogman, it's always the graveyard stuff. And, I think for me, man, Dogman it's evil. I think they live off of evil. They thrive off of it. You hear a lot of encounters where they try to scare people. They don't quite ever catch you, or they don't this, but they'll definitely, I hear people call them fear eaters because they will do that. And, there's a lot we could go into so much. And I think that, we could probably sit and talk all night, but I do want to go back to one thing in your encounter. You said that you had that sighting of that huge dog that you'd never seen before. after, then a couple days after that. Have you ever heard when the Dogman encounters, a lot of times these creatures will follow you or follow you back home? Have you ever heard that?
I've never heard that, but that's one of the first things I thought was, is this thing following me?
You're not alone in that camp, man. And I appreciate you sharing that with me and my audience tonight. I know they really enjoyed that. But if you see something in the future, man, or anything else pops up, man, let me know. Get a hold of me.
You bet. Yeah. And now I've got a casting kit, the whole 9 yards. I'm ready to see something again. I know they're out there. I think maybe my dog. And there's another thing I want to kind of add. I mentioned the polarized glasses. That may have something to do with it. I don't know that it doesn't. Are they a different spectrum of, I don't know how to put it in the right words sometimes, but are they in a different time, different, just whatever force fields that keep us apart? Had a glitch? Is it the Matrix? Are we living? I don't know. I just know that if it does happen again, I guarantee you, I hope to goodness I get video or something of it, because I hate not having evidence.
What a wild world we live in. Sometimes it's hard for me to wrap my mind around these Dogman encounters. It's a completely different level to me than Bigfoot. And these things weren't even on my radar when I first started this channel. And I've been fortunate enough to have some of these stories sent to me, and some very unique ones at that. But I appreciate you guys hanging out with me tonight. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you guys are enjoying this channel. I'm loving doing this, and thanks for all the support. I couldn't do it without you. If you've got an encounter you would like to send me, you can send it to me at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. And, this is the whole reason I say what I say at the end of every show, because, man, these things are so strange, and you better believe that you need to be staying prayed up to make sure your family and you are safe, because things are so different. But, I can't get off here without saying it, guys. Stay prayed up. We'll see you in the next episode.